Richards channel, where you always learn a multitude of key concepts to improve your painting skills.
Okay, so today our topic is going to be the value of painting. And so the little play on words right there, because painting, of course, is valuable to all of us, kind of what we do, and just finding something in painting that helps enrich our lives. But what I'm talking about today is that word value, and value in this case, in the art term, means light to dark. That's all that it means. And so, as I teach, I try to be very specific about what it is that the terms are that I'm using as far as terms. So value, anytime you hear that word value, what it means is how light or how dark is something. And so actually, it's the value of color today. So what we're focusing on is taking a color and making it lighter or making it darker. And so whenever we see, for instance, what we'll be going over today is looking at an apple, and when there is a lit side to the apple, that color that we mix up for that lit side, it's a different color. It's actually a different color, right? The dark side is actually going to be a different color of red than that lighter color of red that's on the light side. So last week we worked on the direction of light, and we kind of captured some light on an apple. Today we're just going to basically colorize it. And so some of y'all have been working on a painting of a kind of a seascape with some houses, and we've done this same thing where it's just working on values in black and white. And now what we're going to do is we're going to begin to colorize those. So you can either, as an exercise today, you can either actually paint an apple. I have some photos over there of apples, photos of pears, if you wanted to kind of change it up a little bit. And they've been photographed in such a way to show off light and shadow on the fruit. So if I could I see some of y'all's paintings? Okay, so this is by Sally Milks, and so she's got this seascape. In here is the ocean, skyline, and it's kind of a moody sort of painting. That's what I kind of liked about it, was that it was kind of moody. Now, as you can see, there are very light lights in places. There are very dark darks, and then there's all kinds of middle tones, and she's still developing that. So this thing that we're going to do with the apple today will really play into how light or how dark do certain colors get in order to be able to make this become enriched by the color of it. And so today what we'll do as an exercise is we're going to mix up some puddles of color. And so for this apple, there'll be light colors and dark colors of red, and we'll see kind of what the differences are, how that changes the hue as we lighten it or darken it. So there's yours, Sally, and then Kitty. So Kitty has a painting that she's kind of one step forward from what Sally's was, same scene, but now it's starting to take on a feeling, and it'll be interesting to see, because as Sally develops hers, depending on what color choices she makes, will completely change maybe what her painting looks like compared to what Kitty's painting looks like. So Kitty's begun to develop this sky. See how the house is standing out and popping against that now? And then you have the very neutralized greens over here for the ocean, because this is not bright light, is it? It's maybe setting sun, or it may be the clouds have been affected by a moon shining through or something like that. But it's definitely more of a somber sort of painting. It's not got like real pizzazz as far as like high chroma, real high chroma happening that you might get, you know, at different times of day. You're going to get different amounts of color in that way. So thank you. Okay, so we're at the Arts Place of Stokes in Danbury, and that was the counter dog that was saying, it's time to start painting. So here we go. I'm just going to put a very directed light source on this apple so that as we're looking at it, it's similar to what we're seeing right here. And so as I point to this, I think you can probably see that over here where the light is hitting the apple the most, maybe kind of downwards and from the right, there are color changes in that red. If I take this light away, see how much that color changes? So in a sense, we know that it's getting lighter and darker by this directed light source, but the color, which is, let's use this word hue, which definition is the color of the color. So the color of the color is different here than it is most certainly down here where it's totally in the shadows. So as an exercise, what I'd like to suggest to people is, as you're trying to find a lighter and darker version of something in your painting, mix up puddles of color to begin with before you ever put anything on your canvas. And so that will kind of train you to think in terms of just how light or how dark is this color change. A really good thing is to use a value scale, and what you can do physically on this apple, we can actually hold this value scale up to lights or darks on the apple and kind of come up with an idea from light to dark, just how dark is that color. You can do that if you're using a photograph. You can do the same kind of thing. Why do we even paint an apple? An apple is an exercise that's just about a rounded form, and so how does light play off of that rounded form? But in a more practical sort of way, like from day to day and just normal life, all of the things that you learn from painting an apple will help you whenever you're doing anything. So in the case of this young man in the picture here, you'll notice that there are definite light and dark changes, light rounding down, light rounding around. And so how does that kind of play off of his face? You'll notice that there's really quick changes across the bridge of the nose, across the forehead. It's a more wide, rounded area, and so the gradation of tone happens more slowly. So as you're thinking even about that in reverse, looking at your apple, how quickly does the light change as it comes around the apple? In a more wide area, you'll see it gradually change from light to dark. In these little bumps on top of the apple, it may happen pretty rapidly that you'll see it change from light to dark. Most certainly, think about the stem. The stem has that same thing. It's very light on one side of the stem, dark on the other, but that's going to happen really quickly around this little narrow stem that sticks up. So let's do some color mixing. If y'all want, you can come in a little bit closer and just kind of have a look. So if we were going to mix color for light to dark, the first thing that you want to think about, when you're thinking about mixing color, the first thing that you want to ask yourself is how light or how dark is that color? Because imagine, see, I have four reds here on my palette. Imagine I were to use this really light, warm red right here to mix the shadow side of that apple. I'd never get there, would I? So it'd be kind of crazy to even think in those terms. But now that alizarin crimson right there, that is really nice and dark. Okay, so if I start thinking in terms of the shadow being a really dark color, I can now look at the color on the apple and see how is it different from alizarin crimson. One thing is it's a very neutral color. It's not going to be real bright and have a lot of energy to it. It's going to be very neutralized. And so if you want to neutralize a color, you want to make it a little more grayish, in other words, you can take its color complement, and the color complement is just simply whatever is the very opposite on the color wheel. So the opposite of red is going to be green on the color wheel. And you don't want to use a lot of green because you're not trying to make this red turn green. You're just trying to neutralize it. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about as we add a little bit of green. Can you see the total difference in this red? I'm just going to add a little bit of white to this so that you can see some of the color change that happens. Here is, see how high energy that red is? Very high chroma. Now let's look at this red here. And so it's also a red, you know, as we add white to it, it gets pinkish, but the point being is that it gets very neutralized by adding this green, and the more green you add to it, the more neutralized that gets. You'll find that shadows have a tendency to be kind of neutralized. You rarely see just a really high chroma shadow. So this is a really good thing to kind of incorporate into your color. So if I was trying to do this exercise of making a puddle of paint that was going to be for the shadow side, I might take this very dark red, this alizarin crimson, mix some green into it to get it kind of neutralized out. You might add a little bit of French ultramarine blue, something a little darker to kind of darken it down a little bit more. Now look how dark of a red that I can create by adding that additional dark color into there. So now I have some paint there to be able to use for my dark side. Now, what about the really light side? I may take, you know, a much lighter version of red. Look how high chroma that is. Look at the intensity of that color. But now I want to mix a green that I can mix with that to maybe neutralize it just a little bit, just to see what would happen if we were going to neutralize that. But I'm mixing a really light green in this case. So if I want to neutralize that red, I don't want to turn it from a light red to a dark red all of a sudden. And look, can you see how high chroma this is and how neutralized that is? So I didn't use very much green in there, did I? I don't want to change it from the hue of red to green or some other color, but I'm just neutralizing. Okay, how about something that's kind of as it's coming around the apple, so it's not bright light, but it's what we call half lit. Maybe we'll take a, I know, I've already started the class. So what you'll find in the half lit area is that half lit has a tendency to be your highest chroma. So anybody, Kitty's a photographer, so she knows this, that if you're photographing, say, fall leaves or something like that, that it's better if it's overcast a little bit. The colors are richer, they're more high chroma whenever it's kind of where it's not real bright light, because the real bright light washes the color out, right? And so, so we can stay relatively high chroma with that. If we find that that color's just not right, maybe it's a little bit more of a orangish red. Maybe it's a little bit more of a cool red, whereas a little more blue in it, you know, that kind of thing. So if that's the case, we can manipulate that color, but we probably don't want to add green to it, because if we add green to it, what's going to happen? It's going to neutralize it, right? So if I wanted to alter that, maybe make it a little bit cooler, I might take a little bit of blue. Now, what happens if I add a lot of blue to that red? Somebody? Violet, right? It's going to turn purple. Yeah, so I just cannot add a whole lot of blue to that. But look at this. So you notice as I'm mixing that I'm mixing in slowly a little bit of this blue. I do it in swirls so that I kind of grab a little piece of blue every time I come around. And now here's the original color, and here's the color that I just created. I used a dark blue, so it got a little bit darker, but it didn't lose its chroma. Now, if I wanted to get it to stay lighter, I could use that same red. Oops, that's not the right red, is it?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Use that same red and use a lighter version of blue. And if I do that, it's not going to get darker, it's just going to get cooler. It might get a little darker because that blue is darker than that red one way or another. But always think in terms of three things when you're doing your color mixing. Three things. You want to know whether it's lighter or darker, that's your starting point, whether it's neutral or high chroma, and the hue. So color changes themselves. So if you can remember those three things and just kind of lay out puddles for those three things, it's just three, right? Just three color, there's three things that we're talking about, but then there's three colors that we're looking for this apple. We're looking for the lit, for the half lit, and for the core shadow. And so if you're painting a house like Sally and Kitty are, there may be that dark side of the house, light side of the house. But you're not going to get that in between. Why? Because the house doesn't round around. The house just goes from the front side of the house to the side of the house where it's in shadow, right? Now, what about if it were a lighthouse? Then, now it's rounding around. You're going to get the same kind of effect, right? So, now let's try putting some of this paint onto this apple up here. So we're going to take that dark puddle, that neutralized dark puddle, and start adding that on to my dark side of the apple. And you'll notice that the cast shadow is basically the same value, light to dark, same value as this apple. But now that we begin to add some color onto this apple, we can see a change up, even though there is shadow there. We can see a change up. And the apple distinguishes itself as being separate from the table merely by the fact that it's a completely different color.
So, Craig, are all, every time you take the paint out of the tube,
Yes.
are all those considered high chroma?
Yes. Yeah, because so high chroma, think about high chroma this way, like it's a scale as opposed to a yes or no. you know, so it's not like it is high chroma or not high chroma. It's more like compared to what. So if you're looking at colors straight out of the tube, these colors that are warmer colors have a tendency to be thought of as more high chroma because they are more intense colors. So your bright cad reds, your bright cad yellows, that kind of thing. But which one is more high chroma, this red or this yellow or this, you know, school bus yellow kind of color, you know? What's the more high chroma just compared to? Most certainly, even this alizarin crimson, which is kind of dark and not so high chroma as the rest of these, might be considered to be very high chroma compared to some of these blues. And it's not so much about whether they're warm or cool. But yes, even this blue, if you look at this French ultramarine blue, that's pretty darn high chroma for a blue. I mean, there's any number of versions of blue that I could put next to that blue, and you would say that one has more intensity to it. So yes, you're absolutely correct, Sally, that straight out of the tube is the highest chroma you can possibly get. Once you mix it with one other color, the chroma starts dissipating and starts becoming more neutralized. If you mix it with two other colors, it's definitely going to be very neutralized. Okay, so now in this half-lit area, we're going to be adding that more high chroma to it. I might even bring a little bit more warmth into it right in here. And those quick changes across those lobes back here, maybe we'll add a little bit of that really high chroma right in there, kind of coming up the side a little bit where it's almost in the shadow, almost in the light. And then we have that really light version. Just gonna mix a little more of that. Now, if you add too much white to a color, what'll happen is that you'll lose the color. It'll get washed out. So you have to be careful about how much white you add. You can only add it just to the point that you still have the color and it's not like just getting like super pink. This is almost like paint by number when you do it like this, right? And that's fine. You can take your time. And then one of the really key things with an apple or with a lot of things is that where the light hits the strongest, you end up with a highlight. And so we can kind of do something like that. You know, what actually makes those highlights really stand out as being even brighter is if you use a little bit of a color complement. So the opposite of that red would be what? What do y'all think?
Green.
Green, right? So if you were to just put a little tinge of green, just a little tinge of green in with that white, it actually makes it just seem a little bit brighter than if you just use white. So there you go. That's the exercise. You always try to do, whenever we're doing paint class, please try to think in terms of that. I'm not here to create a masterpiece. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself every time you start painting on a canvas, you go, if this one doesn't come out looking like a Leonardo da Vinci, then I have absolutely failed. You know, no, that's not true. You're raising your hand and being honest, but everybody else feels exactly the same way. We all do. We want it to come out really looking nice. It satisfies us. We like it when somebody else says it and goes, wow, I really like that, you know. But try not to put that kind of pressure on yourself, because every artist knows that you know, the more you develop as an artist, that's because you've just done a lot of bad paintings, and you eventually get to where maybe the better paintings outweigh the bad paintings. Yes,
So why would you not just start out with the reds rather than put the reds on that gray apple? Do you say you do the gray first to get your values, and then you went back over it with the red?
Yeah.
Would you always do that?
No.
Okay.
No, you absolutely can just paint a painting where you're just choosing colors right off the get-go. And you know, some people will draw. Some people will do a charcoal drawing before they start painting, either as a study separately, or you can take and do a developed drawing and then spray fixative on it and go right over it with oil paint. That does work. It helps you to kind of be thinking, oh, I need a color that is as dark as that dark that I created there. And that's probably, you know, that's the learning in this. It's not really about, you know, trying to develop a painting so much today as it is trying to get that concept in our head. So today's concept was the value of color. And so how light or how dark is a color really helps to kind of give it a feeling of that. Here's one little extra quick tip. So that red that's in the shadow is different than this blue that I kind of tinted the shadow with. You want this edge to kind of disappear. So if you pull a little bit of this red into the blue, a little bit of this blue into the red, back and forth, that edge just kind of disappears, and it helps give it a little more of a lifelike feel. So that's it. So if y'all will, you can get to your easels, and if you're working on the house painting, just kind of try to think in terms of the value of the color. And if you want to try doing an apple, there's some apples over there on the counter, pears over there on the counter that you can use in order to be able to give that a go just as an exercise. But whatever you want to work on, this will absolutely apply to any painting.
Okay. Okay. Hey there, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope you're getting a lot of value out of all of these videos that we're posting on the artist Craig Richards channel. You know, there's all kinds of how-tos, there's the weekly paint class, and there's occasional outings like going out in plein air somewhere. We're going to be going down the Yadkin River in the spring, going to museums, things like that. I think you'd enjoy those. If you're getting value out of these, then like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You have to subscribe in order to be able to hit the notification bell, and that's for you. The reason I'm saying that is so that you know when the next paint class is coming out, so that if you're working on a painting and we're doing it again the next week, that you can follow along with us. And leave us comments, you know, not just for me, but for the students as well. Say, you know, Deb, you did a great painting, Kitty, you did a great painting, or Craig, you did a great demonstration this week. That builds us up, and we want to build you up as well. We want to help you to keep painting and keep growing. You're doing great. Don't tell yourself you're not. You are doing wonderful. Just keep at it, and you'll learn and grow each week with us. So, happy painting.